Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in the world on the 27th of June of 2026. Today we have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first let's talk about the conflict on the territory of Ukraine. First we're going to talk about the Crimean front line. More precisely, we will discuss the situation on the territory of the Kinburn spit. If you remember, several days ago pro-Ukrainian sources published a video with the Ukrainian flag on the territory of the Kinburn spit, and several pro-Ukrainian sources stated that the Russians were forced to fall back from the territory of the Kinburn spit under the pressure of the Ukraine's forces and Ukraine's artillery. And this video was published, for example, on the 25th of June of 2026. As of the evening of that date, nobody adjusted their maps because everybody came to conclusion that this flag was dropped by drone, by a drone of the armed force of Ukraine. And during the 27th of June of 2026, so today pro-Russian sources also published a video about the situation on the territory of the Kinburn spit, and here we can see a video where at least two flags were raised by Russians. This is the first video, this is the first episode with the Russian flag in the northern parts of the Kinburn spit, and this is the second video with the Russian flag, more precisely with the flag of the unit who is responsible for the defense of the Kinburn spit. So two flags were raised by Russians, and these two flags were geolocated. The first flag was raised right exactly on the territory of this building, and I would like to remind you that during the 25th of June of 2026 the Ukrainians also published a video with the Ukrainian flag on the same building, so which means that the Russians confirmed not just control over the territories, but also the Russians confirmed that there were no more flags of the armed force of Ukraine. So now we see that the Russians have strong control over the Kinburn spit. Obviously the situation here is very difficult, so to stay on these territories under pressure of the armed forces of Ukraine, under their artillery pressure and drones pressure, but at the same time we see that the Russians saved control over the territory. Furthermore, during the previous 24 hours, pro-Ukrainian sources published this video where we can see a Russian boat that was trying to bring some supply on positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation in the area of the Kinburn spit, but this boat was damaged by the Ukrainians. So this video confirms that some parts of the southwestern parts of the Kherson region and the southern parts of the Nikolaev region are able to be supplied by Russians just with boats. So the situation is quite complicated, but despite all these difficulties, the Russians control the situation. Now let's move further and let's discuss the second most important update of the previous 24 hours, and we're going to discuss this video that was published today by pro-Russian sources from the area of the settlement by the name of Voznesensk. As you can see, according to the satellite picture, we can see an airfield of the armed forces of Ukraine, and today pro-Russian sources published this video where we can see at least two MiG-29s that were attacked by Russians and destroyed. So just according to this video, the results of attack, the Russians destroyed two MiG-29s of the armed forces of Ukraine. And the thing is that these two aircrafts that the Ukrainians lost today weren't the only aircrafts that the Ukrainians lost during the previous 24 hours. Almost at the same time, pro-Ukrainian sources reported that they lost another MiG-29, but this time in the area of Poltava. The thing is that the Russians during the previous 24 hours launched a drone attack in the direction of the central part of Ukraine using dozens of drones, and the Ukrainians were forced to use aircrafts with the purpose to bring down these aircrafts. So the Ukrainians were using MiG-29s, and probably these MiG-29s that the Ukrainians lost later managed to repel this Russian drone attack, but the thing is that the Russians with their radars managed to discover position of this aircraft, and the Russians used Su-35 aircraft, and the Russians attacked these MiG-29s of the armed forces of Ukraine with Ar-37 air-to-air missile, and as a result of attack the Ukrainian MiG-29 was destroyed somewhere in the area of the settlement by the name of Kryvoruda. So just during the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians lost three MiG-29s, and this is a very big loss for the air forces of the armed forces of Ukraine. Now let's move further and let's discuss the daily attack that was carried out by Russians. According to information we have, the Russians during the previous 24 hours used 129 drones to attack the territory of Ukraine, and as usually these days the Russians were mainly concentrated on attacks on Ukraine's logistics and gas stations. As for the city of Sumy, a gas station was destroyed through the northwestern parts of the settlement. So this one gas station was destroyed several days before the Russians destroyed this gas station. As for the city of Sumy itself, since the beginning of June of 2026, the Russians have already destroyed dozens of gas stations, 2 of them through the eastern part and several gas stations through the southeastern parts of the city of Sumy. Moving further, the settlement of Akhtirka, just during the previous 24 hours, the Russians destroyed 2 more gas stations on the territory of the settlement. We have proofs, we have lots of videos on this matter. In this video, we can see how fire teams were trying to stabilize the situation in this area. As you can see, this is what left from the Akhtirka gas station that the Russians attacked during the previous night. Moving further, the city of Kharkiv. As for the city of Kharkiv, 3 gas stations were destroyed by Russians. The first one further along the R46 road. This one gas station was destroyed. Another gas station was destroyed in the area of the settlement of Podverki, right on the vicinity of the city by the name of Kharkiv. Here we can see a video of consequences of attack. As you can see, this gas station was also completely destroyed, and a 3rd gas station was destroyed in the northern parts of the city of Kharkiv. And so as you can see, just 3 gas stations, and summarizing everything between Chernigov and Kharkiv region, it's already probably 7 gas stations that the Russians destroyed, and this is not a final number. We also received a report that a gas station on the territory of the city of Zaporizhzhia was also destroyed by Russians, and this video was published by pro-Ukrainian sources, the consequences of attack and fire crews trying to extinguish the fire. And it's already 8th gas station. The 9th gas station was destroyed through the northeastern parts of the settlement of Nikopol. And I believe that these gas stations weren't the only gas stations that were destroyed by Russians during the previous 24 hours. We believe that the number is much bigger, which means that the biggest, probably even the major oil crisis is brewing on the territory of Ukraine to the left of this black line. So most likely within the next 3 months, if the conflict on the territory of Ukraine doesn't end, everything to the east of this black line would be completely without fuel. I'm talking about not just civilians, business enterprises. Most important, I'm talking about the armored forces of Ukraine. And this is the approach that the Russians chose for the end of the conflict on the territory of Ukraine, just to force the Ukrainians to accept this situation. Another important thing worth attention is that the negotiations between the President of the Republic of Belarus and the President of the Russian Federation continues, and as we can see, the talks has been taking place for more than 2 days, and they continue. Today they're gonna have more rounds of talks. This is probably the biggest talk since the beginning of the relations between Republic of Belarus and Russia. 2 days of talks, and these talks are taking place at the same time with the fuel crisis in Russia, at the same time with blackmails and ultimatum issued by Ukraine on the territory of Republic of Belarus. So all these things are happening all together, and telling the truth, as of the end of the 27th of June of 2026, nobody knows what exactly the leaders of Russia and Belarus are talking about. Maybe they're talking about the next phase of the conflict on the territory of Ukraine. Maybe they're talking and discussing proposals that were made by Ukrainian side during their meeting with the President of the Republic of Belarus in Minsk several days ago. Nobody knows for sure, but obviously sooner or later we will understand everything. And I would like to point your attention that the Russians, for some reason, stopped attacking Ukraine using tactic of massive attacks. The last massive attack took place on the 15th of June of 2026. During that massive attack, the Russians used hundreds of drones and dozens of missiles, and since the 15th of June of 2026, we haven't received anything like this. The Russians continue attacking Ukraine every single day, but not even a single massive attack, which is also a very interesting detail about the relations between Russia, Ukraine, and the Republic of Belarus. As for Ukrainian side, they continue attacking deep inside of the territory of Russia using hundreds of drones and so on. And for example, today the Ukrainians also use Flamingo missiles or Flamingo jet drones. In this video, we can see how the Ukrainians were launching these jet drones deep inside of the territory of the Russian Federation. As of the Minister of Defense of Russia, they stated that during the previous nights they managed to bring down almost 200 drones and jet drones altogether from the Ukrainian side. And as of the morning of the 27th of June, and despite the fact that Ukrainians were using so many drones and jet drones to attack deep inside of the territory of Russia, we haven't received almost anything on this matter. Yes, several drones were recorded through the territory of the settlement by the name of Volgograd, but this attack probably didn't brought results that the Ukrainians were expecting. So yes, several explosions, probably these drones managed to hit some enterprises, and the Russians reported that casualties among civilians were recorded, but obviously this is not something that we saw on the territory of Moscow during the Moscow massive attack, not something that we saw during the other towns and cities were under attack. So this is not something like this. And the most important thing, that 2 days in a row the Ukrainians are not able to get results as a result of their massive attacks. And as of me, as my understanding the situation, the only explanation to this situation is that the Ukrainians a month ago were using these territories along the border as launching sites to attack deep inside of the territory of Russia. And when the Russians destroyed almost every single gas station along the border and almost every single parking sites along the border, the Ukrainians were forced to move their launching sites deep inside of the territory of Ukraine. But from these positions, the Ukrainians are not able to destroy anything because the Russians see, and the Russians have more time, more hours or minutes to make these vital decisions. So this is the situation. Anyway, let's wait and see what is going to happen next, because the next night between the 27th and the 28th of June is going to be very important, and very important statements we expect after talks between President of Russia and President of the Republic of Belarus. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation on the ground. And first let's talk about the Zaporizhzhia direction. As we discussed during the previous video, we have very heavy clashes through the western Zaporizhzhia direction. Both the Russians and the Ukrainians are attacking. We have significant changes on the ground, both in Russian and Ukrainian favors, and these are the changes on the ground. The Russians continue their offensive operation in the direction of the city of Orekhov. The Russians are trying to isolate the western flank of the city of Orekhov from the area of the Ukrainian counter-offensive operation around the settlement of Stepnogorsk. The sources stated that the Russians reinforced the Stepnogorsk direction with additional FPV drone crews with the purpose not to allow the Ukrainians to develop their offensive operation further. The Ukrainians, according to information we have, introduced more and more forces in this area with the purpose to force the Russians to fall back completely from this area and to ruin Russia's plans regarding the city of Orekhov. So this is a very interesting situation, but we believe that in 10 days everything would be resolved, and then we would understand how the things would going to develop further. Now let's talk about the eastern or northeastern Zaporizhzhia direction. This morning the group of forces East published a video, and during this video we can see that the Russians, as a result of an offensive operation, managed to establish complete control over the settlement of NOVOSKELIUVATE. This video was published by pro-Russian sources, and here we can see at least 2 Russian soldiers that raised the flag, and this episode with the flag took place right exactly at this point. And based on this video and based on the report of the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, we have adjusted the map. And now we see that the Russians have captured almost every single village and every single single town to the south of the settlement of Pokrovske. During the 2 weeks ago or so, the Russians reported about control over Dobropassovo. Now the Russians captured NOVOSKELIUVATE. Most likely in coming days the Russians would try to attack Pisantsy and Bogodarevka, and then the Russians most likely would try to attack the settlement of Alexandrovka. And then from these positions the Russians may try to take under complete control the settlement of Pokrovske, and if Ukrainians lose control over the settlement of Pokrovske, this is going to be something like a breakthrough. But the thing is that the Ukrainians, as you can see according to the map and according to these areas, have already evacuated the territory to the north of the city of Pokrovske, and the Ukrainians most likely right now are trying to reinforce the next defense layer that lays right exactly along this yellow line and along these territories. So the Ukrainians are ready to meet the Russians further to the north, but if the city of Pokrovske falls, then of course the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back from the territories to the east of the settlement of Pokrovske further in the northern direction, and the Russians would be able to create a foothold before moving further deep inside of the Dnipro region. So we see that's not just the Zaporizhzhia direction is collapsing. Now we see that there are some problems through the Dnipro direction as well. As for the Slavyansk-Konstantinovka direction, during the previous 24 hours, we haven't received anything special on the matter of additional changes on the ground. Probably the only video, the only important video with several episodes is that the video was published by Russian sources where we can see how Russians were destroying locomotives along the main supply chains and lines in the direction of the Slavyansk-Konstantinovka agglomeration. The Russians just during this video destroyed 3 or 4 locomotives all over the entire territory of Ukraine. The Ukrainians are not able to use trains to supply their forces in this area, which means that their logistics is very, very difficult, but the Russians are trying to worsen even the current situation. As of the changes on the ground, no changes were recorded. As for the southern Kupiansk direction, here we have heavy clashes through this Barova direction, through the Barova pocket. We have changes both in Russian and Ukrainian favors. As of now, it's very difficult to understand how the things are going to develop, but one thing is clear, that the Russians are tasked to establish complete control over the territory along the river Oskol and to force the Ukrainians to fall back from this area. The Ukrainians right now are trying to counterattack Russians with the purpose to force them to fall back from the area of the city of Lyman and to force the Russians to change their plans or to postpone the beginning of the major battle for the city of Slavyansk. So let's wait and see how the things are going to develop. We see that the Russians, despite the fact that they managed to improve their position significantly through the city of Lyman, but we still haven't received anything that can confirm that the Russians managed to capture the settlement completely. As of the current situation, lots of videos were published by Russians how they were bombing and attacking positions of Ukrainians on the Russian side of the river of Seversky Donetsk. As for the northern directions, today we noted that the Ukrainians have significantly reinforced their units and the group of their forces in the Sumy direction. Today we received reports that hundreds of soldiers, hundreds of brigades have been deployed by the Ukrainians in this area. Lots of FPV drone operators, marines, mechanized brigades, motorized brigades. So thousands of units were deployed by the Ukrainians in the area of the city of Sumy with the purpose not to allow the Russians to break through Ukraine's defense. So which means that in coming days the front line in this area will stall most likely without changes, because now the Ukrainians have concentrated this direction. But this means that the Ukrainians were forced to take these units from somewhere else, which means that somewhere else the Russians would begin their major offensive operation, or the Russians would intensify their attacks. Maybe this is the northeastern parts of the Kharkiv region, where the Russians recently have managed to break through Ukraine's defense, answer the Belarus-Russia agglomeration, and currently the clashes are taking place not just for another village in this area, but for the entire northeastern parts of the Kharkiv region. And that's it for today. The Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.